All rise. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. This honorable special session of Wake County Superior Court is now convened and sitting for the regular dispatch of business. The Honorable Judge G. Brian Collins Jr., President presiding. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. God save the state of this honorable court. Please be seated. Make sure all electronic devices are turned off at this time. Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sheriff. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome all of you on behalf of our senior resident Superior Court Judge Paul Ridgway and our elected clerk of court Blair Williams and all the rest of our courthouse family. We're thrilled and honored that the Bar Association decides to have this ceremony in our court. We consider ourselves a family around here. Especially welcome those of you who are not lawyers, don't come here very often. We know that while your loved ones were alive, that perhaps we saw them at times more than you did. So thank you for sharing them with us. Thank you for allowing us to celebrate their lives and their careers. At this time, I'm going to turn the program over to the President-elect of the 10th Judicial District Bar, Adam Gottsagen.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Adam Gottsagen. I'm the President-elect of the 10th Judicial District. Nancy Grace, the President of the 10th Judicial District, cannot be with us today. She's out of the state traveling. I can't tell you what an honor it is to represent the 10th Judicial District and the Wake County Bar. I think we have a really special, close-knit bar, and it's an honor to represent the 10th Judicial District. These memorial services are one of many special things that our bar does, but these are extremely special services that really mean a lot to everyone involved, and we appreciate such a good turnout today. At this point, I would like to turn over the program to Brian Oaten, who's Ethics Counsel for the North Carolina State Bar and the Chair of the Memorials Committee. Thank you again.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. As Adam said, my name is Brian Oaten. I'm the Chair of the Memorials Committee, and on behalf of that committee, I want to welcome you all to today's very special session of Superior Court. These special sessions, I believe, are integral to the fabric of our bar. I always walk away from these special sessions feeling uplifted, feeling encouraged and inspired about not just our profession, but also our community. I want to express our sincere thanks to the families of these honorees for joining us today and allowing us as a local bar to recognize these four incredible individuals. And for those who have previously attended these special sessions of court, my words will sound familiar, but I do believe they bear repeating. Today we gather not to mourn, but to remember four important members of our legal community, to honor their contributions to our profession, perhaps even share a laugh with a funny memory, or learn something new about an individual we've known for some time. And most importantly, to reflect upon and be inspired by the impact that these individuals had not only on our professional lives, but our personal lives as well. With that said, our first presentation will be Dick Ellis, and Mr. Ellis will be presented by Alex J. Hagan. Alex.
Your Honor, may it please the court, my name is Alex Hagan, and I practice with the law firm of Ellis & Winters in Raleigh. I had the honor and the privilege of practicing with Dick Ellis for over 20 years. When Evelyn Ellis, Dick's wife, and Diane Milliken, Dick's sister, asked me to speak today, I was honored. This sense of honor was soon replaced by complete trepidation and paralysis, which was revisited today when I realized who was speaking on behalf of the other honorees. For what can I say? What can anyone say in 7 or 10 minutes about Dick that can fairly and accurately describe the life of this man and the importance he had on so many who are here today and so many who are not? How do you capture the life of a nationally renowned trial lawyer? Well, this is what I can say. I am the lawyer I am today because of Dick. I started practicing law as Dick's associate many years ago. I, like many others, learned at his feet. Second to his love of his family, Evelyn, Rich, their families, and his sisters and their families, was his love of the law. His love of solving problems, often trying and winning cases, and teaching others how to practice law and how to do it properly. When I first started practicing law, I had the opportunity to accompany Dick to a legal conference, and there I watched him connect with many fellow notables of the National Trial Bar. One member took me aside, and she said to me she had known Dick for many years. She said she described him as the embodiment of everything good in the practice of law. She said, "You will never find a more honest person," and that, she said, is what everyone should want in their lawyer. Shortly after that conference, I had the opportunity to accompany Dick to a meeting with a new client. And on our way to meet that client, I asked him, what was the most important thing a young lawyer could learn? He had two thoughts. The first is, we should measure our success not by how often we win, but by how often we serve the client's best interests. The second was that while it was easy to establish a reputation in the legal community, it was much more important to establish a reputation of integrity. I listened to his words and I nodded, but inside I disagreed, because in my mind the answer was obvious, and it was not what Dick had said. In my mind the answer was the most important thing was to win. The case that I was assisting Dick on had some very complex facts and what I perceived to be very bad facts. As we met with various witnesses and gathered more facts, it became apparent to me that there was very little chance that we were going to win this case. That realization left me disillusioned and confused as to what exactly was our role. After we left the meeting, I watched Dick as he deconstructed the facts, began to strategize the best way to defend the client, and in so doing, he recognized winning was maybe hard, but it wasn't impossible. I asked him how he felt about our chances. In response, he stated that he had learned long ago, and I say this all the time today, that he did not get to write the facts. Obviously, he would have written them quite differently if he did. He said what makes the practice of law exciting and challenging is accepting the circumstances handed to you and trying to better your client's position. As the case progressed, I saw Dick's words put into action. I watched him create a defense theme using facts we gathered in our investigation to provide what could be accepted as a reasonable explanation for the outcome to at least one juror. The end result was favorable, a favorable resolution of the matter for the client. And after it was over, the client asked us to return for a post-mortem to discuss lesson learned and improvements that should be made. One person at the meeting asked Dick what he thought allowed for such a favorable result. Dick responded that the practice of law was neither black nor white, rather a little of both swirled into gray. When lawyers look at cases, they see facts, which is accurate. But what is also accurate is that behind those facts, there are people who design the product, people who perform the procedure, people who interpreted the data. If presented well, jurors will relate, understand, and often empathize with those people. After all, jurors were humans before they were jurors. What he didn't say, but what I knew, is that the lawyer presenting those facts and those defenses is critical. Dick shared with me privately that the most important thing for me to take away from this experience is that nothing we had accomplished, nothing, would have been possible if the court, our client, opposing counsel, and the jury didn't believe us to be truthful. It was that integrity that allowed us to have a civil discourse with our opposition and with the court. It was that reputation that created a trust in our client. This, Dick said, is the single most important thing a lawyer could learn. That a reputation for integrity is your most valuable asset. That reputation must be earned and is invaluable once it is. That reputation must also be nurtured and protected every day. Once damaged or lost, it's nearly impossible to repair. Dick's words have stayed with me and our firm and members of our former firm every day that we practice law. It's those words that guide the frank discussions with the client. It's those words that have made me strive towards a civil discourse with opposing counsel. And on this subject, I still feel like that new lawyer. I know struggling every day to create and maintain a reputation of integrity. But as Dick said, this is one of the challenges of our profession. Dick taught us other things. That you often get more with honey than with vinegar. That you mash the elevator button, you don't push it. That the words, "This is the fun stuff," meant Dick was about to send you out into the line of fire. That you never tell an associate they are wrong, a new associate that they are wrong. Instead, you tell them, you could do it that way, you could, but you might want to do it differently. That you should always listen to what those who disagree with you have to say, and that you should try to understand what others are going through. And you should never let your own self-worth or pride cloud your thinking. There are a large number of lawyers in this county, in this state, in this nation who owe their training to Dick. Many of them are sitting here today. To his nephew, Jay, I know you never had the chance to practice with your uncle. But I hope this gives you a sense of what a great lawyer he was and how much he meant to so many. One of my partners described Dick as our North Star. So many times my partners and I will approach a legal issue or question with one thought: what would Dick do? Dick was our teacher, our mentor, our partner, and our friend, and we miss him greatly. Thank you, Your Honor.
Our next honoree is Thomas Francis Ellis. And Mr. Ellis will be presented by Tom Farr.
Well, Judge Collins, thank you for being here today. Thanks to all of you for being here today. I first came to know Tom Ellis when I accepted the job with Senator John East in 1982, and then joined the law firm of Maupin, Taylor & Ellis in 1983 after serving a clerkship with the person who I think was the best federal judge in the state, Frank Bullock. As a kid from Cincinnati who went to school in Michigan, I got to tell you, I had no idea what I was getting into. Several weeks ago, I was deeply honored by the Ellis Boyle family, who asked me to offer a few words about their father. Several members of that family are here today, including Hood Ellis and Judge Terry Boyle, and I think some of the grandchildren. To that family, just thank you so much for giving me the honor of being able to share a few words about your remarkable patriarch. I have to first begin by saying a few things about all three of my senior partners, Armistead Maupin, W.W. Taylor, and Mr. Ellis. I simply cannot make these points without mentioning all three of them. Because of them, I think everyone who was there when I came will agree that we actually had fun practicing law. What a strange phenomena that unfortunately seems to be missing from many of those who practice today. And I wish we could get back to the days when practicing law was fun. When I became the 19th lawyer at Malpateo and Ellis, all of us in that firm truly loved each other. And I think it was because of the example set by our senior partners. Strangely enough, those of us of that original 19 who are still around, I think we all still love each other today. And I think a lot of that is because of the bond that we still feel for these three great men and the stories that we inevitably share about them whenever we get together. In the practice of law, all three of these senior partners demanded and very quickly converted any young lawyer who didn't fall in line that integrity could never be compromised. They always instructed us, and we did, respect opposing counsel. During their day, all three of these senior partners had warm relations with everyone in the Wake County Bar, and they also had their respect. They also taught us that the client's interest was always first, but another thing they also taught us was sometimes you got to tell the client the truth even when the client doesn't want to hear the truth, no matter what the ramifications may be after you have that conversation. Finally, and I think this is very important, particularly in this day and age, all three of those senior partners taught us the importance of everybody who worked in our office. From the newest associate, our legal secretaries, the word processing staff, something that doesn't exist anymore, but we had a big office where all these ladies did was type stuff up all day for hours after hours after hours, an incredibly hard job. And even down to the janitor. All three of these men were extremely intolerant of anyone who failed to respect all of the members of the MT&E team. Now, Tom Ellis loved his country, and because of that love, he entered the world of politics. He ran many successful campaigns for Senators Jesse Helms, my boss, John East, Locke Faircloth, and other candidates. Less well known is the role he played in the election of President Ronald Reagan. In 1976, Governor Reagan challenged incumbent President Gerald Ford. No one had ever really done this before. No one gave Reagan a chance, and he lost all the initial primaries. All of the Republican leaders in North Carolina were for President Ford, with the exception of Tom Ellis and Jesse Helms. The North Carolina primary was Reagan's last gasp as his campaign was running out of money. There's even a story that I've heard that Reagan came for an event in North Carolina and he didn't have enough money to fill up his plane, and Ellis wrote a personal check to put the gas into Reagan's plane so he could fly to the next location. Perhaps because of their lack of resources, the Reagan campaign didn't object too much when Mr. Ellis basically threw them out of the state and demanded that he be able to take over Reagan's primary effort. He and Senator Helms raised enough money to produce a 30-minute infomercial of Reagan giving a speech, and then they ran that in late night TV and every major media market in North Carolina. Now, this is a true story. On the night of the North Carolina primary, Reagan assumed that he would once again lose all the primaries that were being held that day. He prepared a speech announcing the suspension of his campaign, which he was planning to give when he landed in a state up north, which I recall was Minnesota. After he landed, as he was walking out of the plane to concede the election, someone ran up to him and whispered in his ear, "Tom Ellis has won the North Carolina primary campaign for you, Governor Reagan." The concession speech was quickly put back in his pocket. Now, as they say, the rest is history. Reagan went on to win almost all the remaining primaries in 1976, and he came very close to beating President Ford in the 1976 convention in Kansas City. Many political observers, including Fred Barnes and Stan Evans, have opined that Reagan would have disappeared from politics, gone into obscurity, never would have been heard again if he had not won the North Carolina primary in 1976, all engineered by Tom Ellis. Now, this is not an insignificant event, to say the least, and I think all of us, including young lawyers, should take heart that, yes, we can change the world. Even people in Raleigh, North Carolina can change the world. Those of us who loved and admired President Reagan believed that his major accomplishment was purposefully engaging the Soviet Union in an arms race in order to break their corrupt communist economy. I actually have read a paper that Reagan wrote in 1962 outlining that this is exactly what he was going to do if he ever became president. This strategy worked. The Berlin Wall fell only a few years after President Reagan had asked Mr. Gorbachev to tear down this wall. The history of the world changed, and it changed because of the imagination and drive of a Raleigh lawyer named Tom Ellis. Now, Mr. Ellis had a great sense of humor. I attended an event with him in the 1990s, and a young admirer came up to him and said, "Mr. Ellis, I understand you're the best courtroom lawyer in North Carolina." To which Ellis said, "Damn right. Farr, what's a courtroom?" Now, this typically self-deprecating joke, despite this typically self-deprecating joke, not many people in this courtroom today will remember that back in the day, Mr. Ellis was truly one of the finest trial lawyers in North Carolina. In most of his trials, he worked with our other great senior partner, W.W. Taylor, who those of us who worked with him think is the smartest lawyer we've ever known in our lives. Almost universally, we all feel that way. One of the firm's best clients was CSX Railroad, and the lore in our firm is that Ellis and Taylor tried over 100 crossing accident cases for CSX and its predecessors and never once lost a jury trial. Think about that for a second. Now, whether the CSX legend is 100% accurate or not, I will share a story told to me by Ron Dilthey, who many of you know. Ron is one of our greatest Wake County lawyers. He's probably tried more than 500 cases, and that may be conservative, and he almost always wins. And sometimes those of us who have cases with him know that he sometimes wins because he pounds us into submission. At lunch a few years ago, Ron handled a case where Ellis and Taylor were the opponents, and he told me that back in the day, when a Ellis and Taylor file came into his firm, no one else in his firm would agree to take it except for Ron. And Ron also told me that in all the years he practiced law, the only two lawyers that he never beat in a case were Ellis and Taylor. Now, I think that's quite a testament to the skills of those two lawyers, particularly coming from someone as talented as Ron Dilthey. Of course, Mr. Ellis was part of the greatest generation, as described by Tom Brokaw. He served in the United States Navy. He started college at Dartmouth, but moved to North Carolina because Farr, New Hampshire was too cold. He attended law school at the University of Virginia and started his practice as an assistant U.S. attorney. As an assistant U.S. attorney, his major, quote, clients, as he called them, were bootleggers who resided in an area close to Wake Forest known as the Hurricane, in case some of you may remember that area. He would often prosecute these same people year after year after year, over and over again. He told us that these, quote, clients would warmly greet their prosecutor every time they renewed their acquaintance before a federal judge. And with a grin in his statement, they would say, "Howdy, Mr. Ellis. Hope you had a great summer." Something not known about Mr. Ellis, and I have to tell you, in all the years I knew him, I never called him Tom Ellis. It was always Mr. Ellis. But something not really known about him was his support for charitable organizations like the Tammy Lynn Foundation. I recall a time where Tammy Lynn lost a government program or government grant for a very important program, and they were desperate. And he and his friend Bernie Reeves immediately engaged a very successful fundraising campaign in Metro magazine, which completely replaced the money that the Tammy Lynn Foundation had lost because of the withdrawal of this federal grant. For many years, Mr. Ellis was a loyal member and member of the vestry at his beloved St. Timothy's Episcopal Church. There he worked and helped his good friend George Hale, the rector, lead many people to their faith, while also nurturing the development of the great St. Timothy's School, which is still there today. A further note is the work Mr. Ellis did in preserving the St. David's Independent Episcopal School, which is an amazing K through 12 preparatory school that's located close to North Hills, as all of you I'm sure know. What Mr. Ellis did at St. David's reminds me of Christopher Wren, the great English architect. Christopher Wren is buried in St. Paul's Cathedral in London, a church that he built. And on his gravestone, there's an inscription, "To see my monument, look around you." If you ever go to the beautiful St. David's campus and look at these beautiful buildings and all the wonderful kids that go to school there, you are looking at a monument to the man who saved the very existence of that school. No discussion of Mr. Ellis could be complete without explaining how much he loved God, his family, and his friends. Mr. Ellis attended Bible study fellowship in Raleigh for over 20 years and matured in his faith through the inspirational leadership of Joe Knott, someone many of us know who's a very good trial lawyer here in Raleigh, and he led BSF during that time frame. Joe and Mr. Ellis were extremely close, and I know Mr. Ellis was indebted to Joe for all that he did to further develop Mr. Ellis's love of the Lord. His love of the Lord is also reflected in his complete devotion to his children, his daughter Debbie and her husband Judge Boyle, who we're privileged to have here with us today, his son Hood, who in his own right, I think we all know Hood is a chip off the old block and is one of the very finest lawyers in the state of North Carolina, and Hood's wife Ann and all of their children and grandchildren. Finally, if you were a friend of Tom Ellis, you knew that you had a rock in your corner, no matter what pitfalls or troubles might befall you, any of your friends, or any of your families. I simply cannot discuss Mr. Ellis without mentioning his amazing wife, Jeanette. She was a legend, a true legend in her own right, with all the amazing work she did to help people with substance abuse in Wake County. These two were the perfect couple, and they were deeply in love throughout their entire lives. They had a nickname for each other. Miss Ellis was known as Goose, and Mr. Ellis was known as Beaver. So one of my most cherished moments in my life was walking into the Ellis home with these two elderly people, Mr. Ellis opening the door and saying, "Goose, Goose," and Mrs. Ellis replying, "Is that you, Beaver?" I am sure that the first thing Tom Ellis said when he entered the gates of heaven was, "Goose, Goose," and I'm also equally sure that the response was, "Is that you, Beaver? I've been waiting to see you." In conclusion, I want to talk about my friend Ken Udy, and he is my friend, Governor Cooper's chief of staff. But Ken was an even better friend of Tom Ellis, which many of you might be surprised to learn, because their political views are truly in different universes. But Ken always remembered the kindness and respect showed to him by Mr. Ellis when Ken was a young political reporter. They maintained that deep friendship up until the time of Mr. Ellis's passing. Ken was one of the speakers at the retirement party my current law firm, Ogletree Deacons, had for Mr. Ellis. And he summed up Mr. Ellis well. He described Mr. Ellis as a tenacious competitor, but someone who always was a gentleman and always respected the views of those who disagreed with him. Ken's summary is the way all of us should remember Mr. Ellis. He was a tenacious defender of the principles he believed made the United States the greatest country in the world. But he was also a person who treated everyone he knew or met with courtesy, honesty, and compassion. Tom Ellis was a great lawyer, an effective politician, but most importantly, one of the finest human beings I've ever known. And after he gets done talking to Jeanette, when he went to heaven, I'm sure the next words he heard were, "Well done, good and faithful servant, well done." Thank you, Judge Collins.
Our next honoree is Broxie J. Nelson. And Mr. Nelson will be presented by the Honorable Burley B. Mitchell, Jr.
If you are, please, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here today to memorialize my friend Broxie Nelson. Broxie J. Nelson was born in Chester, South Carolina on December 3rd, 1938. He was reared in that tiny town of less than 10,000 people, probably less than 5,000 at that time. He was an extraordinary young person from his earliest years, and he took advantage of every opportunity that tiny little town offered. He was valedictorian and student body president of the Chester High School in his senior year, 1957. He was then admitted to Davidson University, Davidson College. For all of we Carolina and other school graduates, that's the only school in the state that's had 23 Nobel laureates. Hard to believe any little tiny school could do that. He was active in reserve officers training while he was at Davidson in the ROTC. Upon graduating, he served on active duty with the United States Army from 1962 to 1966. He then attended Wake Forest University School of Law, graduating in '68. He came to Raleigh at that time to serve as an assistant city attorney to Donald Smith. When Donnie was appointed as a judge of the Superior Court, Broxie was elevated to the position of Raleigh City Attorney. At that point, I came to know Broxie very well, as I was Wake County's elected district attorney while he served as city attorney many years ago. We regularly came into contact and often worked together on local issues. I found Broxie Nelson to be an exceptionally bright and dedicated public servant who always put the public's welfare first. Although we functioned in a political world, I never saw him allow partisan political considerations to affect his judgment on any public issue. In fact, I don't think I ever knew what political party he identified with, if any. I can't say that about many lawyers. Broxie Nelson was simply a dedicated public servant in the finest tradition of our profession. In 1977, Broxie resigned from his position as city attorney and joined his friend Beverly Lake Jr. to form the Raleigh law firm of Lake and Nelson. When Chief Justice Lake left the firm to enter political life, Broxie resumed his public career of service to the state and humanity. He served in several public positions thereafter, including North Carolina Employment Security Commission, where he was when he retired. He served as supervisor of Wake County elections and until his retirement due to declining health. Throughout his career, Broxie continued his service to state and country in the North Carolina National Guard. He served for 32 years and rose to the rank of colonel and commanding officer of the Selective Service Unit. That unit is responsible for ensuring that there are selective service boards throughout the state and that they have all the resources they need to support a military draft system. Broxie served in that unit during the Vietnam War and thereafter. After the draft was ended, he continued to travel the state to ensure that people and procedures were in place in all localities to quickly institute a fair selection system should Congress order a call-up. I spoke with several people who served with him, and the common thread in their comments was that Colonel Broxie Nelson was absolutely committed to fairness and courtesy for all those subjected to the system. He took great care to see that every claim, this was during Vietnam, some of you will remember, he took great care to see that every claim of unique situation, from conscientious objection to bone spurs, was carefully considered and investigated, and the person treated fairly. One man who served with him for many years said, Broxie always treated everyone fairly and courteously, and insisted everyone in the unit do so. He was a perfect example, this person said, Dickie Baddour, he was a perfect example of what is meant by the phrase an officer and a gentleman. In his final years, Broxie took great comfort in his life at home with his wife Janet, who's here with us today, and his stepson Mark Scher, for whom he had a special affection. In closing, I will just add that Broxie's was a life well spent in service to others. Our profession can take great pride in him and ask no more of any lawyer.
Our final honoree is Raymond Mason Taylor. And Mr. Taylor will be presented by the Honorable James G. Exum, Jr.
Your Honor, may it please the court. It's a real privilege for me to be here and make these remarks in memory of attorney Raymond Mason Taylor, born in 1933, who passed from this earth in March 2018. Raymond was not only my friend and colleague for many years, he was one of the finest people I ever knew. We first met when we were students at the University of North Carolina in the mid-50s, but I got to know, like, and respect him when we worked together at the North Carolina Supreme Court in 1960 as law clerks or research assistants to the justices. Raymond worked for Justice William Rodman and I for Justice Emory Denny. Raymond was a serious, meticulous, industrious, well-informed, and erudite young lawyer who was a lot of fun to be around. He spoke in a unique, sonorous tone that made him seem older than he was. But he had a quick, sometimes acerbic wit that he always employed with good humor, even when it was directed at you, which in my case it often was. We became good friends that year. From then on, Raymond was one of my favorite people, someone I always look forward to seeing or hearing from or learning about. We next worked together in the mid-1970s when I was an associate justice on the court and Raymond was the marshal and librarian, a position he held from 1964 until 1977. As librarian, Raymond ran a tight ship. He reorganized the library, adding needed collections, eliminating less useful ones, and transforming it into an efficient, pleasant, well-organized, and well-equipped place to work. And if, as a justice, I held on to a book too long, Raymond would not hesitate to remind me and any other member of the court that the book needed to be returned. As marshal, Raymond assisted the court especially during public sessions like oral argument, where he opened and closed the sessions and provided help as needed to the justices and to the lawyers appearing before the court. In that capacity, Raymond meticulously took it upon himself to see that each justice's water glass was kept full. I drank a lot of water in those days. And it seemed that Raymond was busier keeping my water glass full than all the other justices combined. So one day, as he was filling my glass in the middle of an oral argument, he leaned over the bench and whispered, "Your Honor, it has come to my attention that you drink more water than any justice in the history of the court." It was all I could do to keep from breaking out in laughter. After leaving the court in 1977, Raymond resumed the practice of law as a sole practitioner. He was active in his community, serving as president of the West Raleigh Rotary Club, and in his profession, serving as chair of the Legislative Committee of the North Carolina Bar Association's Elder Law Section. He was also the state coordinator of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys and a member of White Memorial Presbyterian Church. Raymond was a perfectionist. It was the court's custom to have a photograph made of it, all the justices sitting at their places behind the bench each time there was a change in the membership of the court. Raymond noted that in all the photos, the lighting was such that none of the portraits behind the bench were visible, and this caused him great concern. So he hired a professional lighting company to advise us about what could be done. At the next photo session, under Raymond's supervision, the lighting consultants had filled the courtroom with scaffolding, floor to ceiling, front to back. And on the scaffolding were a dozen or more floodlights positioned in strategic places. The result was a photo of the court showing not only the well-lit faces of the justices, but also the portraits on the wall behind the bench. It was the best image of the court I ever saw. I have that photo in my law office, and every time I look at it, I think of Raymond and his constant insistence that any project involving the court be accomplished as perfectly as possible. One of Raymond's most significant accomplishments was his service as project director of the Federal Judicial Center's study of federal court libraries, which culminated in his monumental report titled Federal Court Libraries, published in 1981. Now, his work on this project got national attention, and because of it, Raymond became a leading candidate for the position of librarian of the Library of Congress. He actually lost out in a close situation to Daniel Borston. Raymond was a popular teacher. He was an adjunct professor at what is now Barton College in Wilson, and he taught economics and business law at NC State University. Let's hear what some of his students had to say about him as a teacher. One said, "He was a great teacher and an inspiration to all students who crossed his path. The memory of his sense of humor and his intelligence will be something I always value." Another said, "The world is a better place because of all the lives he touched, especially mine." And another, how little did I know he would turn a dry subject matter into a fascinating introduction to law and jurisprudence. He is the reason I went to law school. He took the time to talk with me about all kinds of legal matters. I will never forget the difference he made in my career. One of his colleagues on the staff of the North Carolina Supreme Court said of Raymond, "He was a wonderful person and helped me so much during my career with the court. Honest, witty, intelligent, but most of all, dependable. He was a man of his word." In 1965, Raymond was married to the love of his life, Rachel High, who predeceased him in 2013. They had one daughter, Elizabeth Betsy Lee Garber, who is here with us today, and who lives in High Point with her husband, Kenneth Garber. And the Garbers have 3 sons, Andrew, Ryan, and Isaac. To all of us here today, let me say, and particularly to Betsy Garber, let me say that your father was a good man. He was loved and admired by those who knew him, and of all the people I've known, none better than Raymond exemplify what it means to be a gentleman and a scholar. Thank you, Ron.
That concludes today's program, and what a great program it was. Thank you all to our presenters for sharing your thoughtful words and your shared memories. And I want to thank everyone on the Memorials Committee for your great work, as always, in putting these sessions together. Many thanks to our videographer, Brian Miller of Frontrunner Productions, Charla Sharp and Whitney Von Hom of the 10th Judicial District and the Wake County Bar. To your honor for presiding over these special sessions, Clerk Williams and his staff, thank you so much. Mr. Bailiff, and of course, to all of you here for joining us today for this very special occasion. And with that, I will hand it back to you, Judge Collins.
Well, Mr. Oden, the biggest thanks of all should go to you. Mr. Oden is the driving force behind these sessions. He does an excellent job and keeps everybody going in the right direction, and we appreciate your service very, very much. I've been coming to these sessions for over 30 years now, and I don't like to compare them, but this has certainly been a very inspirational and educational celebration of 4 legendary lawyers. It's been a pleasure and an honor for me to serve here today. With that, Mr. Sheriff, would you please adjourn this special session of the Wake County Superior Court sine die?
All rise. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. This honorable special session of Wake County Superior Court now stands adjourned. Sine die. God save the state of this honorable court.
Thank you very much.